Good evening. Welcome to the County Council Public Hearing, regular meeting and executive session, October 17, 2019. Can I do a roll call?
Buckles present.
Holloway present.
Bennett present.
Bannon present.
Carlson present.
Burge present.
Let it be known we've established a quorum. Can we all rise for a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first public hearings. Item A, proposed text amendments to the Cape Charles zoning ordinance.
There's two different text amendments here that are being public hearing for. One would be section 820 of the zoning ordinance, and this is proposed text amendment for specifically related to the Historic District Review Board. And this would be a change to section 820, design guidelines, standards for review. In order to achieve the purposes of the Historic District Review Board shall be guided in its decisions by the design guidelines. B would say it shall be the duty of the Historic District Review Board to prepare amendments to the design guidelines. And then C would require town council to adopt and amend the design guidelines after conducting at least one public hearing pursuant of the Code of Virginia. That's the first one. And then the second would be the Harbor Area Review Board, or the Harbor Working Group. This was, the background is the mayor brought forth a group composed of the Planning Commission Chair, Harbor Area Review Board Chair, two council members, one extra Harbor Area Review Board member, and the town planner and another planning commissioner to discuss development within the harbor area, and there are many proposed changes for that, specifically in some definitions, items within the boundary of the harbor district overlay to identify that, so that it will go on the zoning map officially. Amendments to the harbor district, section 3.9. Amendments to the planned unit development section, which is section 312. And then amendments to the subdivision ordinance.
Thank you, Zach. Do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, I have. H. Spencer Murray.
Chairman Murray, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Thank you so much. I wear so many hats, some of which are to come off soon. I think it's fair to tell you tonight that I'm wearing the hat of the director of the Columbia Atlantic Railroad. And thank you for this opportunity to comment on the proposed text amendments. Somebody did a lot of work, and I want you to know that I recognize that. But I will comment on the proposed text amendments to the Harbor District, the Harbor Area Overlay District, the Planned Unit Development, the PUD, the 30-foot setback for the community trail master plan, and at last my concerns regarding the process, if you will, with review, the Harbor Area Review Board, and in the case of a PUD or a development located inside the Main Street mixed area, also the Historic District Review Board. This is a lot of reviews and a lot of process. I don't think it's a showstopper, but I can tell you that it's complicated. And your town planner, who's much smarter than I am, can explain the process more completely. But I did try to look at it, and I did try to understand it. while clearly a lot of the text amendments are very, very favorable to maximizing the value of the railroad yard property to both Cape Charles and the county, I remain concerned that the Harbor District is regulated to remain, it seems, in the comments, primarily a commercial district. When persons much wiser than me have suggested that Cape Charles primarily needs housing and parking. The proposed changes to the mixed-use area in PUD are helpful, however, very much so. And again, the process for review and approval could be simplified in my view and integrated, hopefully, across a number of reviews. To display my firm grasp of the obvious, I think we all know that the value of the railroad yard to Canoni, Cape Charles, Northampton, and the entire Eastern Shore is directly proportionate to the amount of profitable development that can occur there. This also drives Cape Charles and county revenues for many decades to come. So we clearly are facing a momentous issue and with momentous consequences for the future. I continue to ask obnoxiously, how much more commercial development does Cape Charles need? And will the requirement for commercial development, even in a PUD, with the choices you have, two of which are four in the PUD, limit investment and runoff investors? Having asked those questions and expressed that, Mr. Mayor and Council, I can tell you that Canoni remains open and fully open to work with the Cape Charles to achieve the maximum positive results for all who have interest in our future. And I would like, Mr. Mayor, to return at a later date, perhaps November 21st or before, to update the council in closed session on a number of railroad issues, including the 40-acre parcel that affects us all. With your permission, sir, I'll do that. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you listening to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
I have two questions. The railroad yard on the other side of Mason, maybe you turn at the drugstore, it looks like a jungle. I think we have a coyote nest out there also. Is Canoni, which is bankrupt, is the Accomack Northampton Planning Transportation District going to cut the grass? It looks like an unkept yard in a nice tourist town.
I can get the grass cut. I think it's been expressed to you before, we don't cut all of the grass in where everything is, because quite frankly, we don't want people camping out there. Now that the season is over for that, I think it's very possible that we can get that cut. And you're speaking specifically down by Rayfields and then that corner?
And then past the town hall down to, almost down to the
okay.
Ferry King.
I'll see if I'll get that done.
Another thing is, we are one of the powerhouses of taxation in Northern County, and we have a parking problem. Wouldn't it be nice if we would get together and use some of the Canoni land when it's free for parking?
I'm wearing my Canoni hat.
Okay.
And that other hat's coming off, and in fact, they're debating who's going to take it down in Oklahoma at school right now. I need to get down there. But I totally agree with you. I mean, I think, as I pointed out, I think parking is a challenge here. And whatever formula we can work with developers, the county, the town, as we're working with you all on sewer and other things, I think we need to do it. It's clearly important. Any other questions? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Excuse me?
There are the comments we have. We don't have any more.
Okay. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
All in favor? Next is,
So to be established, we're going to have a public hearing. That's what this was about, right? To establish the date for public hearing.
No, this was.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We'll take action.
few.
Kicking us off.
Recognition of visitors, presentations. Cape Charles Main Street, Ms. Karen, some more, did I say that right?
You did.
All right.
All right. Well, good evening, Town Council. I've been now in this job for about 6 months, and I started mid-April, where I think I presented to you for the first time within the first 2 weeks that I was on board. It felt like a fire hose opened up when I started, but obviously I'm still standing here, so I didn't drown. So I'm still here, still going. What I want to do tonight is just where we're at today, and first and foremost, we still have some confusion on what Cape Charles Main Street is and what we do, so we're going to continue to publish our mission, continue to talk about our mission, and that is about vibrant and attractive downtown and revitalization of the town. Tonight, I'm going to talk about what we've accomplished in this past 6 months, as well as what we're going to do in the next quarter. And then Bill Stram, our organization chair, is going to talk about the financials. So first off, our accomplishment first quarter, or last fiscal quarter and then first of this year. There's a long list here, and I'm not going to go through all of them in depth here at this moment because I've got several slides following that are going to go into several of these specifically. But if you just kind of glance down through them, there's a lot that's been done in the last 6 months, including getting up the new lamp posts, and thank you very much for getting that done for us and letting us get those banners up to the Cape Charles Business Association, dissolving, etc. So I'm going to start by going through some in more detail. First of all, Summer of Love. I know everyone saw the mural down at 207 Mason, and that became one of the most photographed places in Cape Charles after the love sign that I think I've ever seen. Every day I saw multiple people going in there and taking photographs with their families, their betrothed. It was wonderful. And we intend to keep that going with changing it out seasonally. We also had launched new merchandise, and I believe you've seen them. We launched the Summer of Love t-shirts. And thank you everyone who purchased them, because that helps to continue our revitalization efforts for Cape Charles Main Street, which goes right back into the town. We kicked off a concert in Central Park and a Virginia's for Learners campaign. I think it's important to note the Virginia for Learners campaign gathered 20 boxes of school supplies for our school children, and also $630 to go towards what teachers still needed. Our Hearts of Love, we pulled almost, it was between $950 and $1,000 were donated, dollar by dollar, to those boxes to help us maintain the love sign. So people truly want to invest in Cape Charles. We had free movies, we had golf cart parade, plein air event, and we closed with the DeLoreans, and I have to take just a moment to tell you a funny story. My husband, at one of the concerts, was standing in line for the men's room, and a guy behind him started off a conversation, and he said to him, by chance, do you know how many people live in Cape Charles permanently? What's the residence? And he said, oh, I think it's about 1,000. He said, well, you can count me as 1,001. He said, because this is the coolest town I've ever been in, and he said, this is where I'm going to move. So I think Summer of Love accomplished what it needed to accomplish. We're launching a new merchandise strategy because we understand that Cape Charles Main Street gets a ton of support right now from the town, but we also know that we have to become more self-sustaining. So one of the things that we decided to do was start selling merchandise, and it's more than just the first Summer of Love t-shirts. We have started selling other items such as the Love t-shirt, some tanks, some new hats, as well as our t-shirts. So hopefully, what's happened now, we've already broken even on the ones that we've paid for, and we have merchandise now. It's all upside from here. Update on Main Street in Motion. We also launched the first fundraising campaign for Cape Charles Main Street. We mailed 1,452 letters, 130 donations, and so far $18,615 have come in. Now, that is before we actually just send out our corporate donation request. So we hope that we will meet our goal of 21,000, and of course we'll keep you updated on that. But also, I went ahead and bought a nonprofit permit for our Main Street office. This will save us a ton of money going forward, because instead of having to put a first-class stamp on everything we mail, if we're doing fundraising and or other mailings of at least 250, it saves us a huge amount. We go from 0.08 or 0.17 down, from 55 cents a piece. So that's a big deal to us. We launched a new town map, and again, this is just a placeholder for us. We are in the process of developing a brand new map, and one that will be more digital in nature, and also one that has an interactive capability. So that process has started, and we will keep you updated. We're hoping to launch it first quarter of 2020. We also completed the zip code survey. We had Arnett and Muldrow did that the first time for us, and we felt we could take that on, so we did it ourselves in August, and we'll continue each quarter from here on. We had 8 stores participate, 1,384 visitors, 584 unique zip codes visited our town in that week. What's crazy to me is that out of the total visitors, 83% were outside the Eastern Shore. They're definitely not, they weren't locals. And we're only scratching the surface on some of the potential areas. We still have 30 to 35% of the visitors that did come were within 2 hours of here. So this will give us some good information going forward for some of the market research we've done, and for helping us to get more finely targeted communications going out.
I have a question.
Yes.
Your total number of visitors, that's not the total number of surveys. Your survey must say how many within your
No,
family.
that's the number of visitors that came in the shop and made question on the survey.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Of 8 merchants.
Yep,
Right.
out of 8
Very good.
merchants.
Very good. Okay.
Okay. Now, I'm not going to go through all the pie charts because obviously the numbers are all in there, but I want you to see what we do have, just a quick glance. So it's a really spread out where the visitors are coming from right now. But if you start grouping some of them together, you can see kind of certain pockets that we really need to do a better job of marketing to. And that's our next goal, is to get those targeted campaigns moving. We broke it down to only Virginia visitors so that we could see where they're coming from within the state. And then we took all of the Eastern Shore itself and broke it down. And what we're going to do with these, obviously we talked about we need to find the best areas to get the most bang for the buck for the marketing dollars we have to spend. We need to continue to define the trends that we see going with the visitors that are coming. And we want to develop a strong relationship with the merchants by delivering personalized results. When we delivered these results at Main Street Connect, each of the 8 that came, that did the survey, we gave them their own feedback, because each store we took and gave them their own pie chart to show exactly where theirs came from, because it's not the same for all of the different stores. But what that helped us do is see that the certain shops have a very similar type of visitor, where others were very different. So you could tell where some visitors visited 2 of the shops, but not others. So really good information that we'll continue to gather. We've also had the dissolution of Cape Charles Business Association that dissolved and merged into Cape Charles Main Street, which means we're now responsible for delivering the Festive Fridays, which we are in full swing right now planning. And we're going to continue to help indoctrinate the merchants into the new CCMS EV approach, the Economic Vitality approach. Trademarking of the love sign. I'm a firm believer in branding and protecting our assets. And one of the largest assets Cape Charles has is our love sign. That love sign is there to benefit everyone in the town of Cape Charles, and it's now Main Street's responsibility to do that responsibly. So what we are doing, we did complete a contract with Miriam, who paid for the design of that. She has signed those rights over to Cape Charles Main Street exclusively. We also acquired the physical love sign with the dissolution of the business association. We are working with the attorney, Jeff Gray, to complete our trademark work. And we will be ready to launch within a week or two the parameters around what this means to everyone in town that sells merchandise. Because what we believe the right thing to do is for profits of the love sign to go directly back to the town to benefit everyone. And that's what needs to happen, and that's what we intend to start the process of making happen. Marketing update. Once we got the new branding, Cape Charles, Virginia's Cape, everything we do has to transition over to there, and the first thing was the website. We experienced a few difficulties doing that because one of the things is we don't control the back end of it ourselves right now. It's controlled by a company outside, so getting updates to that site is very difficult. And what we need to do is take over ownership of that. So we've already started the process of working on a new website and making it more simplified so that we can handle it ourselves in-house. We're concentrating our efforts on marketing the shoulder seasons coming up, and we intend to implement a Discover Cape Charles, Virginia's Cape campaign. We also want to develop better relationships and more deep relationships with our stakeholders, and that's everyone, from residents to our potential employers, and merchants. We want to meet with the realtors. We want to find out what drives people here. We think we have some good ideas, but we need to gather more information, because Cape Charles Main Street needs to work in concert with everyone here to help drive what we need to happen here, to attract the right business, attract people, find places for them to live, and we need to help you market that. Social media update. Obviously, between April and September 30th, there was a huge jump in our Instagram, Facebook, and hashtags. And I think that the mural was responsible for a lot of those hashtags, as was the love sign. Projects for the second quarter. Well, we took over the tourism guide. That ad is getting ready to post in the next couple of weeks. We need to complete the trademarking of the love sign with Jeff. That's of great importance. We'll launch a merchant trademark licensing program. That's where merchants will be able to license use of the trademark through Cape Charles Main Street. We are going to launch a new Cape Charles ornament program. This is another way for us to continue to help fund efforts in Cape Charles. The new ornament is the same company that did the Washington White House. Yep, the White House ornaments. So this ornament will be available for sale. It's already being picked up by merchants, and I will tell another quick story. Oh, sure. It has the history card inside of it. So it will be an annual item that we sell. Every year we will do a new one that has a historic building involved of some sort, and it is a limited quantity. So we intend, this year we're doing 500. One of the merchants, Moonrise, picked theirs up today, and she texted me within an hour. She said, Karen, I put them up on my counter. She said within 30 minutes I sold my first one. So we will be working on a new mural at 207 Mason. We are currently in the design process, and we're hoping that has the exact effect that the first one did. We hope that people through winter and spring will come there, take pictures, and continue to enjoy it. We'll begin the development of our new discovery map, as we spoke about earlier. We'll continue to work on grants. We have a couple in process right now. We will begin the process for full designation of Main Street. We are definitely going to make this deadline. We don't have that many more things we have to do. We will be submitting for that full designation, which opens up a lot more opportunity for Main Street to get additional grants and larger grants. And, of course, complete Festive Fridays. Now I'm going to turn it over to Bill. He's going to talk about the financials.
That council was one of the largest business park ever. By the way.
Good evening. I'm just going to talk about last quarter's financials. We had income last quarter of almost $67,000. Big chunk of that coming from the town. Thank you again. $25,000. But some highlights here. Cape Charles in motion brought in a little over $18,000. So it was the second big. It was our second big income driver. The Festive Fridays, as Karen alluded to, we've taken that over. That was our third one. They brought in that quarter, brought in $12,000. To date, though, we've already brought in $21,000. So sponsorships. So then we had our merchandise sales, almost $10,000 in merchandise sales. Our Summer of Love, not a whole lot, about $1,185, and then the love sign through some donations and whatnot, $600, almost $700. So that was our income. Of course, we won't. The summer, Cape Charles in motion is almost over, so we won't have that big income over next quarter. Our expenses total $41,175. Payroll being the number one. Our merchandise expenses was $8,600. So right there, from the merchandise sales, we made over $1,000 off the sales versus the cost. Our Summer of Love expenses were $7,000. Marketing was $4,300. As you are aware, we have an office now, so we had everything you do with an office, the utilities, the rent. Got a lot of free equipment and furniture for that, but we still had office expenses of $3,200. Our IT, phone, and postage was $2,500. We had $800 in postage for the Cape Charles in motion program. Conferences fit almost $1,600, and miscellaneous expenses such as some fundraising, legal, shipping, and event expenses were $1,300. Like I said, for a total of $41,175. So there's a delta there of $25,000 between income. We're doing questions. I'll turn it back over to Karen.
There's just one slide left. I want to thank, we couldn't do any of what we do without volunteers. And to date, we've had over almost 4,000 hours that people in Cape Charles have donated to help Main Street do what we do. And that's amazing. That basically equates to over $100,000 if we had to buy that labor. So I want to thank everybody in this room, because several of you volunteered in here. So thank you again. And that's what we have. And do we have any other questions? Yes.
I'm glad you made the presentation tonight, because I've asked about 10 people, what do you know what is Main Street doing? And one answer is they put up banners and they did something in Strawberry Plaza.
Yep.
And other than that, it's nothing. And I get on my one thing that I'm having with the TAM issue, you know what's going to be coming up. The town's giving you over 200, maybe about $250,000. You know, are we going to be paid back, or do we have to? That's just a question I ask on my own. If you get money, will we pay back? Because people are saying you're doing everything on Main Street, and you're doing nothing else around.
Well, yeah, we have a very defined area, an outline that takes us down Mason, actually includes the brewery, comes down Mason, has Strawberry to Randolph and Peach to Randolph. That is our area as outlined by our Virginia Main Street charter. We do have other, did support Central Park with the concert for Summer of Love. We donated some of that money to that. We also have spent some money to do the zip code survey, but that was, very minimal. But we got a lot for it. We're trying to save money. If we had to go out and buy that, it was going to cost us another $3,000. So that's things that we've done on our own, and we're trying to save as much money as we can so that we can continue. We are getting new things, new banners, and we're hoping to have some grants that allow us to get more lampposts put up, continuing down towards Bay Avenue. So we are working on some other projects. We also are working on trying to get additional benches and planters to go in other spots. We also have had a person come in that supports Main Street and went around and helped us look at how do we look in Cape Charles, what needs to change to make us even better, and looked at sidewalks that aren't completely correct, looked at curbs that aren't completely correct, and they've outlined a plan for us of things that we need to do. So Cape Charles Main Street's doing a lot of things that aren't naturally or just all listed here.
Public Works did that 2 years ago.
That's already been done.
It's already been done.
Most of what that person did is actually more beautification things,
Right.
like tying the landscaping that's kind of haphazard where there's trees and things like that. How can we beautify what's there and make it work in the bigger flow?
Yep.
But also keep in mind, we're also tasked to take over the town's marketing completely, which is not part of Main Street. The entire marketing of the town is part of that budget, that money is used for.
The biggest thing that's happening
A lot-
in Charles,
a
I
lot of
think, with marketing by word of mouth is Airbnb, which has really taken over the town. Was trying to get a parking spot in town at your house during the summertime, which is a plus. It's a good tax base.
But 40% of that $100,000 is specifically toward the marketing responsibility that we took with kind of the economic development piece of it.
Yeah,
I
the
don't
town
think
manager-
you're ever going to see, if you're looking for physical things that add up to $200,000, we don't view that as our charge as Main Street. So we will continually disappoint, because I don't think the town needs 200,000 things necessarily, but there's a lot of, and one big thing, we don't need to market our strong season at all. We don't. We are focusing all of those marketing dollars specifically on balancing out our shoulder season. And as Karen pointed out, one of the shifts in marketing is to start to work with realtors and some other folks to help market Cape Charles as a place to live and work. And, what is that audience and how can we fill that? So it's a unique balance kind of in comparison to a lot of other Main Streets in particular with that marketing kind of responsibility.
I think you knew it was coming.
Oh, sure, but I think it's important. I think it's important to understand just so that, we're using the transit occupancy tax that the town collects. And if there's an expectation that we're physically going to buy $100,000 with them, we turn in a budget that's pretty straightforward of what the expenses will be. Maybe 20,000 of those end up being a physical structure of that 100,000. So if we're looking for just physical things, then we need to relook at that come budget season, because I don't know that that's our specific responsibility.
No, but the marketing dollars definitely bring in the tourist thing here to basically go to the restaurants and the B&Bs to generate all that revenue. So if you're looking for a way of seeing where it's coming from, just look at the last year and a half.
Airbnb in town is taking off.
It has. It's taken off a lot because of our national recognition and publications. The Washington Post, Crystal Living, Southern Living, that you can't buy in any way. You just have to get yourself out
I
there.
have two questions. Are all merchants involved with Main Street now that the Business Association has folded in? Can you say all merchants, or do you have a few outliers, or?
I can't say all merchants. I think they're all kind of wondering what's next after the Business Association melted into Cape Charles Main Street. I can say that we just did a Main Street Connect, which we invited all the merchants to. We are trying to do that at least once a quarter. And we had 22 merchants show up that night, which, you know, we thought was great. And I think it'll get better and better with each quarter.
Okay. The other question I had, the disposition of the train at Strawberry Street, is there something being looked at relative to what's going to be proposed for that?
We continue to look at it, and we're looking at different grants. I don't know that it's going to be realistic because the amount it's going to take is so large. We need to wait, I think, till we get designation so that we have access to bigger money.
Okay.
That's where I think we stand.
A big grant came across my desk, actually, the computer today. That would be one that we could pursue, I just found out about. But really the next big step is coming back to the council. The last we left it was split. We want to know town's support.
Well, the last, if I remember, was that Main Street was going to come back with proposals.
Well, we have the one we didn't submit that to. I thought I submitted that to town council, no?
No,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of.
We have that which we applied for a grant through the county.
Okay, so
Yeah,
maybe
we
it's
do-
worth bringing that back to the table just to discuss.
Sure.
and
We
just
have,
like to know where this is
we have
going.
gotten one grant towards it, and we will continue to pursue it. Because I think it's important to the town. It's why Cape Charles is here.
Well, it's not so much just the money. I want to know where that car is going and what it's going to be doing. That's,
And
okay.
I think that fits into, I guess there's just so many pieces. That's why it needs to go back here.
Right, okay.
And that's on my list to talk to Smitty about to get on the agenda when we have time to do that. Because it really depends on the railroad plan and everything there.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item B, recognition of town employees celebrating a significant anniversary. I'd like to say, I don't think she's here tonight. But Sharon Sylvie, been here 10 years as of the 19th, I believe. Her and Ann have made a great team. I believe earlier this year, Sharon became a full-time employee at the library, which is very well deserving. With the amount of programs and outreach they do at the library is truly amazing. And hats off to Ann for leading up Sharon for 10 years. Thank you. Okay, item 6, hearing on appeal of the Historic District Review Board's decision for 209 Mason Avenue.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is an appeal of the Historic District Review Board's decision on proposed changes to the design of the storefront units, lower level of 209 Mason Avenue. This property has been to the Historic District Review Board on several occasions for a number of design features, both first floor storefronts as well as the upstairs loggia apartments. The documents included in your packet are the minutes or the notes from the pre-application meeting held on the 13th of September, and the staff report that was sent to Historic District Review Board for their meeting, as well as the property owner, the appellant's letter requesting the appeal and the grounds for which he's making the appeal.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members.
Hey,
I apologize, I'm understanding before I have recovered from the call to concentrate hard to try and understand that. I'm the owner of 209 Mason Avenue. I bought the building back in February of this year. And before I made the commitment to purchase, I came to Mr. Duray and talked about what my idea for the building was. And one of the suggestions that Mr. Duray had was to add 2 ADA condos at the ground level, which I've done. That substantially reduced the depth of the retail spaces. My initial design was to not to remodify the storefronts per se, but to include upgraded storefronts to meet code and to try and make it as close as possible to the historic look of the building. I was denied, even though staff had recommended that this be approved. I came back with another design, which was denied again. I came back a third time and basically left everything where it was, and of course I was approved. I couldn't appeal at the time because I had to wait 30 days for my building permit to be approved, and I couldn't wait to build. I couldn't wait any longer to start the building process. As any developer knows, once you start that process, the money starts pouring out, and the quicker you can get it built, the quicker you can start recovering your funds. So I had to wait for 30 days, and then only then could I go back in front of the review board to make another appeal to try and modify the entrance. And what I'm trying to do is to shorten the entrances. If you imagine that the depth of the retail spaces before the apartments were built was 40 feet long, for example. I'm not sure exactly the depth of them right now. So you've got two of the entrances protrude into the space by 10 or 15 feet. On a long, narrow building, that's not that bad. Once you reduce this front by almost 2/3, that eats up a substantial amount of the entrance of the building. I understand the first two denials because it took away from the historic appeal. My last submission to the historic review board is to shorten it, but not to change any of the materials. I'm keeping the same storefront, I'm keeping the same glass. All I'm requesting is that I bring two of the storefronts forward to match one of the storefronts that already is a shorter storefront. And if I'd known earlier that my meeting was today, I would have invited you all prior to Monday, and I apologize for that late invitation, but I was only notified on Monday of this meeting today. I'm not sure if the board or with the council has actually been into the building at all, but I would like to have taken you to show you what the differences are with the space that already is a short entrance compared to the spaces that are the deeper entrances, and it's a quite substantial difference. During the last review board historic meeting, it was implied that the only reason I'm making this change is financial. While under normal conditions, I guess that's not a bad thing. If the person involved to read the minutes of that meeting, I would have seen that my pre-app meeting, I had specifically said it is for practical purposes and not for financial purposes. This town, I've made a pretty large investment, not just in this property, but in several other properties in St. Charles. My intent is not to damage the look of the building. My intent is to make it more practical. I think that the space, if it's left alone, particularly the first or the easternmost space, which is already inhibited by a staircase going up into the two levels attached to or adjacent to that narrow entrance, it makes it for a very, very awkward little space to rent out. If I could bring that forward and make it a more rectangular space, it would serve, I think, the town better in attracting people to use that space. I have a potential tenant taking that space now. Who knows how long I'll be there for. This is a long-term prospect to look at trying to make this a more rentable space. It's not a financial thing for me. I've invested over $2 million in this project. 10 square feet is not going to make or break this project. So it's definitely not a financial thing, it's a practical thing. And I would really ask the council to please consider allowing me to keep the materials in to shorten the entrance to make it practical.
Anybody have any questions?
Can I just add one quick question, just because I'm not very good on spatial things. So on this diagram here, this is the entrance, is that correct?
That's the entrance.
Right.
And then the two other entrances have that shape. And my request is to bring them to match the depth of that shape. Not the shape, but just the depth.
And then how many feet is that?
That is probably about 3 or 4 feet.
This one. And this one is,
After that, probably,
thank you.
Maybe asking the same questions that I was looking at this also, but I couldn't hear the answer, so could you tell me?
yeah, so the westernmost entrance that's got an angle shape to it
Yes.
is approximately 3 to 4 feet deep. The two existing eastern entrance, the center and the eastern entrance, are stepped in, and they are probably somewhere between 10 and 15 feet deep into the space.
Okay, and I would ask, you mentioned that there was a substantial difference between the depth of the retail space.
Yes, ma'am.
So could you tell me what the total depth of the spaces are with the changes and without the changes?
Yes, it's going to be approximate. I don't have the actual dimensions in front of me, but I think the building depth is approximately 40 feet, and I'm taking, no, it's more than that, it's probably about 60 feet, and I'm taking about 40 of it up at the back part of it for residential, which leaves me 20 feet. So percentage-wise, it's close to 2/3 of the space taken up in residential, and the left with just a little more than 1/3 on retail.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, I looked at these entrances, I thought all of them had angles.
Just the one has an angle. My original proposal was to try and match all three of them as an angle. And it was denied. But it was denied, I think, for two reasons. One is changing that shape, and the other one was I was trying to get a storefront that was thermal glass and a code compliant.
Because as you go down Mason Avenue, there's quite a number of entrances that are varying depths. Some are deep, some are shallow, some are none.
Yes.
So,
The reason I'd like for you to have seen it is if you walk down Mason Avenue right now, you wouldn't tell if that entrance is 3 feet deep or 10 feet deep. So you're not going to see much of a change unless you're right on the entrance. If you look at the elevations, my request there on the last submittal was to show two elevations, the new elevation and the existing elevation. And there is no difference. There's no difference in the elevations itself. All I'm doing is requesting to bring it forward to make it a more practical space. Same material, I'm not changing. The same brass mullion, take the glass out, I'll cut it down to bring it forward, but I won't be changing material. So the same material, so you won't notice a whole lot of the difference.
I do have a public comment on this application that I received right before the meeting.
I'll get to that in a second. Anybody have any more questions?
Another one, please. I want to make sure that I understand procedurally how this kind of got tangled up. Okay, so please correct me if I say anything that's not right. So you have been through the Historic Review Board with a couple of different variations, both storefront and at both levels, right? And you waited for this particular modification after the appeal time had already expired? Did you ask for this one and then it was denied, or is this a brand new one? I was having a little bit of trouble following.
So I couldn't appeal during the time. There was a wait period after the approved historic
You
review.
did the building permit.
I waited for the building.
Yeah.
Yes, so, and I didn't want to wait another month before a building permit.
Okay.
So I had to wait for that building permit to be issued, and then only could I apply for a...
So that was your business decision on procedurally how to do
It was
that?
a time, yes.
Okay. Did you think about doing this at first, when you first did the plans?
It's in the original plans, yes. The original plans wasn't to keep the original storefront, because I thought once we changed it, I would have had to change to code compliant front. So on the original plans, it does show for a modified entrance, and I was denied.
Okay. Thank you.
Staff had approved it, but the historic review board.
I understand. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? No?
Schaffner?
The only thing I have is, when did we switch over to the Secretary of Interior standards from ours? When did we switch from our?
Well, we didn't. If you go into our design guidelines, they extract the 10 standards for rehabilitation.
What I'm getting at, they used to reference the Secretary of the Interior Standards 2017 Rehabilitation of Historic Buildings, page 113 recommends no. And that's going out of their guidelines, not our guidelines. So,
Well, it's a subset within the guidelines, but you can ask the board when they get to the table.
just curious.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaffner?
Let me, if it's okay, let me address that question first. It wasn't directed to me. If you look on page 18 of our design guidelines, that's where that quote comes from. It's right off our design guidelines. It is a quote from actual Park Service guidelines, but it is incorporated in the guidelines. We heard this appeal, or I shouldn't say this appeal, we heard this applicant's request, I think, either 3 or 4 times. And each time we heard the request, it was to change or alter, I shouldn't say just, there were numerous things on the request, but each time it included a phase to alter the storefronts. And the interesting thing about the Parsons building is that it represents probably the only original and remaining storefront in town. I don't think we have any others that have all their original elements still there. So we were pretty adamant about trying to keep that storefront just like it was. The eclectic nature of it, the unusual characteristics that they're not all the same is part of what makes it unique and makes it part of the contributing factor to the town. So we worked very hard with this applicant over several meetings to try to give and take, and we did. We gave a lot. We gave a lot to get these loggia windows that are really not compatible with what the design guidelines are, but we sort of worked a little bit to give some in order to get these storefronts preserved. And then what happens is then after this period of time, this cooling off period, the applicant comes back with an appeal so that they can get in front of town council to have an appeal. So, you know, the process has been all along a give and take to try to get to where everybody wanted to be. But now all of a sudden, we're hard up against an appeal on one item, not on the whole building, on one item associated with it. So you're not seeing the whole process, you're only seeing one item. Also, the applicant talks about the town requesting him to put these apartments in, and that's what's creating the hardship. I requested Zach to look into that, and the note is that as far as anybody knows, there was no request on any part of the town or anybody in the town to request that to be done. The applicant brought that to the table, not anybody from the town. So this has been known all along. This is nothing new. The applicant has known all along that we were trying to preserve the storefront. And if we chop off 5 to 7 feet of it, that historic fabric is gone. You're not going to get it back. It's gone. So if you want to keep the town looking like its historic appearance should be, you don't want to chop it up and throw it away. So we based our decision on 3 specific items in the guidelines. We just talked about one that appears on page 18. The second one appears on page 47, and I quote, "Retain all elements, materials, and features that are original to the building or are sensitive, remodeling and repair as necessary." The third one is also on page 47 before, and I quote, "Restore as many original elements as possible, particularly the materials, windows, decorative details, and cornice." Happy to answer any questions if you can.
I wasn't, when I looked at the conditional use permit, the applicant had stated on the conditional use permit for the two accessory dwelling units, or the two ADA compliant units in the rear. So I didn't know if there was a conversation between Larry and him that Larry might have suggested it. I just saw that the applicant had applied on it on the initial application. So if Larry wants to speak to that.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if you look in the C1 district, which is the downtown commercial district, there have been a number of apartments approved at the ground level by way of conditional use. And part of that conditional use, whether that was in the 700 block, the Huckler building, 700 block, something of Mason, as well as where the dentist was, those have been approved conditional use for ADA accessibility, which complies with really what the comprehensive plan says about providing for a variety of housing. And frankly, with an aging population, you need ADA compliant housing. A second floor apartment doesn't necessarily allow for that unless there's the mandate for an elevator to go in. So this is a way to get more ADA compliant housing available as a conditional use. So that's why in the commercial 1 district you find the ground floor apartments are all ADA by way of conditional use. And that's, I think the Huckler building was maybe 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, by way of a precedent.
Yeah, I have another question. Not that this is within the purview of the Historic District Review Board, but I was wondering what size those units are, and could adjustment not have been made, or could an adjustment be made within the size of the residential unit without affecting the storefront?
No, ma'am. To meet the code and for the exits, the size had already been reduced as much as possible without interfering with access or exit from those units into the lobby area, which by code, according to Jeb, I needed to have. So I pushed those as far back as I could to create as much space in the retail as I could. And to Mr. Shackleton's point, that there was a lot of give and take. I didn't understand that it was purely to salvage the storefront area. Part of my doing I'm hoping was to maintain the original materials that are there now. In the original application that I made, even one of the review board members had tried to argue with them that this was actually an adaptive reuse project, and that maybe it should be seen with that. But I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to invest in a town that I've grown to like. I'm remodeling a building that's been standing vacant for 30 years. It has plywood up on the windows. It has broken baseboards in the front. It has glass that is cracked. I don't know that there would have been another buyer behind me. I'm assuming there would be. Maybe not. Maybe another 30 years. It costs me money to do what I'm requesting. This isn't something that I'm trying to do to come in there as a guy out in Richmond, coming to Cape Charles, Cavalier. I get the sense that maybe people feel like I'm trying to do that. This is my second development project in my career. I'm a commercial general contractor for 22 years. I've invested in other properties in this town because I like this town. So I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not going to try to do something that I'm not supposed to do. I'm merely making a request that I think is still reasonable, that can be turned back. Mr. Shackleton's incorrect. It can be turned back. If once I made my modification, somewhere down the road a guy buys a building and says I want to return it back, he can turn it back. It's not irreversible. I'm not taking stuff out that can't be turned back. I'm just trying to make it more practical for the next person that might lease the space, for the next owner that might take that place. Potentially, it's taken, we don't want an empty retail space. This town is becoming a very popular town. And I'm trying to help make it a better place. That's what I'm trying to do.
Is there anything different with Zach, do you know if there's anything different between the adaptive reuse portion of it from a code standpoint versus basically rehabilitation of historic building? Is there any difference between the two? If someone's going to do an adaptive reuse, is there, or there is or not?
You're talking about specifically the building code
Yeah.
requirements? I'm not sure.
But I can tell you, if you go into the Secretary of Interior kind of criteria, what they'll say is, be careful when you do that kind of change that you trying to change functionality. And you may have to consider a new function if you are modifying to a great extent. They go so far as that, and say, well, I'm sorry, retain what you got and pick a different function.
Before we go any further discussion, I think we've got one comment.
Okay.
This is from David Cavler. He is a licensed real estate broker in Virginia, North Carolina. He's the supervisor broker at Lumiere Realty, 113 Mason Avenue, Cape Charles, Virginia. Dear Town Council, I am writing in favor of approval of the appeal submitted to you this evening for the architectural changes in the Parsons building. The owner is a very experienced builder, developer, who is totally committed to presenting the finest project he can produce as major asset of our town's historic district. To say the least, its impact on our economy will be quite significant. The project has already had 4 reviews by the Historic Review Board, including 3 denials and 1 approval. And until now, the applicant has worked with the review board without seeking any appeals from town council. His request tonight is reasonable and should not be denied. Each member of the council received an email this week inviting her visit to the property with the applicant to inspect the subject of this application, but it is doubtful any have done so. I submit that unless you are inclined to approve his application, the council should defer the decision for 1 month to allow council members on-site visit. How can you in good faith deny this application without performing the most basic due diligence? The contractors are working daily to complete this major historic rehabilitation of one of our district's finest buildings in time for the next tour season. Please give the applicant your best attention and cooperation. Sincerely, David L. Cowell.
What do you all think?
Well, I'll put a motion on the table and we can talk about it.
Okay.
I don't see any reason to deviate from the decision made by the Historic District Review Board and therefore recommend this appeal be denied.
Got a motion? Got a second? Any discussion?
Okay, so my rationale for the position is really, this is a contributing structure. All right, it's in the National Historic Places Register. Our guidelines are very specific that were quoted, that are particular standards. It comes under rehabilitation now, okay? Property shall be used for a historical purpose or be placed in a new use that requires minimal change to the defining characteristic of the building. So the page that's coming out of our design guideline, page 113 in, I was looking to say, okay, so is the storefront considered, although I kind of think it is. And the page 113 kind of says, yes, the storefront is certainly a defining characteristic. So therefore, I base that decision, or I agree with the position by the Historic District Review Board.
Oh, I mean, the statement says removing or substantially changing storefronts and their features which are important in defining the overall historic character of the building so that as a result the character is diminished is pretty subjective interpretation as to what is substantially changing, what is diminishing character, and that, that's not something that's defined. So, I would agree with the applicant that, in fact, looking at the elevation of the building, and particularly if you did the second, his other alternate recommendation, which does a step in a little bit deeper, but shallower than the original, is not substantially diminishing the look of the building nor altering the historic character of it.
I agree with Steve. I think that there's so much that they're doing with the building that is staying in line with keeping the character of the building. And as truly an adaptive reuse, they're trying to adapt to that specific space and its interior, you know, and doing that. And I think you can't physically see that as a distinguishable difference. I commend the Historic Review Board because they have, like Mr. Shackelford said, they've worked very closely with Mr. Meyer through the process, and there was a lot of working together to get to this point. So I commend both groups because I happen to have been at that time to those. So I feel like incredibly torn tonight because I know what the Historic District Review Board did, but I keep going back to that. I don't believe it's diminishing character in that space, and I can't in good conscience say that it is. So.
People of goodwill can have different opinions on this, and I guess I'll have to say that page 47 on storefronts and building elements, where it has picture and words, speaks really loudly to me. Where it can retain all elements, materials, and features that are original to the building. We're talking about storefronts. Then it says or, and it's another phrase, since the remodeling is necessary. And it identifies what building elements are. And I get the reuse of the functionality. I do. And that is a dilemma, for sure. But that's an interior change that the Historic Review Board doesn't have anything to say about, okay? That it's totally up to the property owner to make those adjustments, modifications, and make the use functional and practical and all those sorts of things. So, to me, it's hard for me to get around this. That is not retaining an original element, material, and feature.
Well, he is retaining a portion of it.
Well, it's a portion of it, but it says all of it.
These are the nights that you wish you had the flu.
May I add one other thing, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
So, I understand the applicant's agreement that it can be put back, the physical dimensions can be put back, that this is the only storefront that has all of its elements. When he cuts that mullion in two, he cuts the glass, he takes all that out, it's gone. It will not be back. Nobody will come back and put that back together because it's very difficult to do that. You can't find those elements easily. It's not something that can be returned. And I think it's a key element to that look. You can find it on postcards, you can find it all over. And the eclectic nature of it is what it is. And that's what makes it what it is.
May I add a public comment?
Yes, I know.
How did he have permission to have a follow-up?
He's the chair of the board.
Conflict of interest in this meeting.
This is not a conflict of interest. And I'll tell you, this is not the Historic District Review Board. And if you want to continue on, I'll have the officer escort you out.
Understood.
Larry, you notice in your staff recommendations, you didn't have a recommendation.
No, I have no recommendation. The standard speaks for itself. If the original materials are retained, it's in conformity. If they're not retained, it's not in conformity.
Oh, we got a motion. We got a second. Any more discussion?
I don't think the Historic Review Board really, it wasn't an easy decision. You know, I agree with them now. So.
All in favor?
Aye.
Please take the motion, please.
Well, the motion was to recommend this appeal be denied. I said aye.
Aye.
Nays? I agree with the historic review board.
Okay.
You probably don't believe that, but I do.
All right. So, outcome. I got a motion to close the appeal hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public comments.
First one is from Linda, Winners, Sir Ronski. This is on the homestay regulations. Dear Town Council, we're happy to learn that council is addressing homestay accommodations and enacting some new regulations to preserve the character and charm of Cape Charles. We've been property owners having first purchased a lot about 20 years ago and have since purchased a home and 3 more lots, including a commercial property. We currently rent our 4-bedroom house with a media room out during the summer season and have a maximum sleeping capacity of 9. The majority of our renters are multi-generational families who have been responsible and respectful of our house, adhering to house and POA rules, which include parking and driveway only. We are fortunate to have overflow parking in Bay Creek, which the town may want to consider for town rentals. Visitors with jet skis, trail boats, etc. could very well park their vehicles in designated town parking lot. But it's not just visitors creating a traffic issue. We've seen trailers, commercial vehicles, and boats on blocks year-round on public streets. We definitely support golf cart regulations being posted with business license. We already do this during our rental season for liability reasons and for safety and knowledge of our renters. We also like the idea of registry. We do not support the proposed limitation to 1 homestay per year, as there are residents who own more than 1 property in Cape Charles. We understand the reason for this proposal, to protect larger investors from monopolizing vacation homes. However, we strongly encourage the town to consider adding verbiage that would give exception to small investors, residents such as us, who may already have more than 1 property. Thank you for your consideration, and we are happy to answer any questions about our experience with homestay. Feel free to email or call us at the number below. Comment 2 is Elaine Vissery. Hello, she's also commenting on homestay regulations. Hello, I wanted to respond to the limitation on number of homestay accommodations as I read in the Cape Charles Mirror. Am I reading correctly that we can only own 1 property for use as a rental property? I also would want to do all I can to preserve the character and charm of Cape Charles. It is what drew us to Cape Charles over 4 years ago when we purchased our home on Sunset Boulevard. Because we can only use that home for 6 months of the year, we decided to rent it during the summer season. We have a wonderful summer season and decided to purchase a condo in Big Creek as an investment rental property, but also a great place for extended family to stay when they visit. We hope to retire to Cape Charles in the future and wanted to invest in this fabulous town. Our adult son moved to Cape Charles and we purchased a home for him as well. If he decides to move on, we would consider converting the home to a rental property as well. If we are unable to rent these additional homes, what are we to do with them? We have registered our 2 rental properties with town. We pay our town, county, and state taxes. We have license from all. We post inside that home and inside the golf cart the town and state regulations. Our guests have been respectful of our home and our town. Each unit sleeps 6 with a maximum of 8, including children and babies. We have abided by all the rules and we're paid to have this investment taken from us. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Elaine Vissery. And I have one more on homestead. This is on the homestead regulations also. This is from J. Scott Faircloth. He gave his address, 216 Montgomery. While I spent my childhood and teenage years in nearby Virginia Beach, I am a relative newcomer to the town of Cape Charles. And while I knew about Cape Charles, mostly from wavy TV 10 News at 6 or the Virginia Pilot Ledger Star newspaper, something ever interesting happened. I had never actually visited until 5 years ago. When I did finally visit, I instantly fell in love with the town. I love the turn of the century homes, the history, the friendly people, and the fact that I could buy any random item I ever needed at Watson's. I knew one day that I'd buy a second home in Cape Charles that would eventually become my home in retirement. Last September, we were honored to have purchased a home on Monroe Avenue that was perfect for our family. Built in 1922, it exuded Cape Charles' charm and everything we love about the town. However, part of our plan to afford the second home was to be able to selectively rent it out, wanting to be a good neighbor, citizen, and steward of the legacy of Cape Charles. I immediately sought to dot all of my I's and cross all of my T's to make sure I was in compliance with the town. I got and passed the required rental inspection, got my business license set up, and all of my tax paperwork in order to ensure I was in 100% compliance with the town. I thought those hurdles were sufficient to ensure that interests of the town were properly satisfied. However, I was alarmed to learn that the town of Cape Charles was exploring additional regulation on homeowners. After reading over the proposed regulations, I'm alarmed to say the least. For the sake of expedience, here is a bulleted list of my concerns. First one is governmental overreach. Ronald Reagan once famously said, "Government's view of the economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it." While Reagan was being humorous, he highlights a salient point. Essentially, government will eventually become so burdensome on budding enterprise that it will cannibalize itself. Cape Charles is already taxing it and regulating it. Do you really want to move toward over-regulating it and thus stifling the emerging local economy? Right now, Cape Charles is in the midst of a true renaissance, adding more regulations to what is already required and, in my view, sufficient. We will work to suffocate this gentrification of Cape Charles. The town should be looking ways to promote more people coming, falling in love with Cape Charles, not less. And that means that is all for public comments.
There's more to that.
It'll be in the minutes, and it's entirety.
I ask if you can submit those three to us before the minutes. You know, some of these letters we're getting on the day's notice.
Well, the letter I read, just
Right.
started reading, was today. I got it today.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they're allowed to send them until, what?
Well,
Yeah.
all I'm saying, that's fine. Can we get them like tomorrow?
I can ask.
Okay, all right, that's all.
And I would remind council to, we got emails before on the subject. Some of them were repeated tonight, but I would go back because probably back in, August.
Tammy, for the B&B.
We're going to discuss that. Just continue on.
Do we have anybody else signed up?
Do not.
Up next, the consent agenda. Consists of the approval of the agenda format, approval of minutes, approval of the August 31st, 2019 financial report, monthly department reports, waste collection contract extension.
I have one question. Do I ask it now, or how do we go about that? On the treasurer's report.
Well, now we can say
All right, I move that we accept the consent agenda minus the treasury
Oh, I have a comment on the utilities report as well.
and the utility report.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Utilities report. Nope.
My question came to be, there were several references from Deb this month, and I know she's doing a great job following up on this, but I was just questioning all the late, there's quite a few mentions of late payers for meals tax, for B-Pol and catching up. Those people are facing penalties, correct?
Correct.
Yes. Just wanted, just so it's a fair playing ground for those who are paying on time. Okay, thank you. It was an easy question. Yeah, mine was easy.
Oh, well, I had one on that as well, which I don't understand, and Ted not here, I might not understand it, but last month, the harbor report for this year and 2 previous years was trending in one direction. This month, it's trending in the other direction.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear it.
Not only
That's
that,
supposed to be year-to-date though, right?
yeah, so apparently there was, as Dave stated that night, there was some reports done. I think one of her staff members went over to the harbor and kind of got things straightened out, put them up.
So I changed 2 years ago.
No, it actually booked what should have been booked a month earlier.
Yeah.
What month are we reporting on?
So this one here in this report is August, through August.
Correct.
The one you got last month was through July, so it's only 1 month.
Right.
So it's only the first month of the year, so.
Okay.
Particularly, are you looking at the 3-year revenue comparison?
Mhm.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so my comment on public utilities it's actually 2. And the thing that I always talk about is wastewater production exceeding water production, which typically is done every month except for the last 3 months, and suddenly they turned around. And water production now exceeds wastewater production mysteriously, and no rhyme, no reason, no explanation. I don't know what's going on. The other thing is that this is for September. The water production in September exceeded 7 million gallons, which is higher than any other month in the summer, and this is after the summer, so that's curious to me as well. And I think there's some trigger that when we produce over 6 million gallons a month, we have to kick in another well, that is the tower well, to supplement the production. So I don't know what's going on. The data that's reported has no rhyme or reason, and no one can explain it. So I'm getting tired of seeing this without somebody explaining what's going on.
I'll do my best to explain in the absence of the utilities director. The difference between the water production and sewer treatment numbers has generally been tied to the I&I, and we know that. The I&I firm to go out and do the closed circuiting is, finalizing and doing their work this week. In my conversation with the utilities director, our expectation is that we're going to find cracked pipes that during a high water table fill with water. And so while we're picking up stormwater, practically, we'll find out how much stormwater we're picking up through where in the system, in the stormwater system, that then eventually goes into the sewer plant. We're also likely seeing the elevation of the water table and into cracked pipes that then infiltrates into the system. So as a result, we've had 3 very dry months as well. We've had a dry summer. We'll see if that's going to be the case, because if we've got cracks and lines that run beneath the water table, when the water table rises, that's got no choice but to go into the sewer system, unless that pipe's repaired or slip lines in some capacity. Now, whether that translates into because Dave and I had this discussion, it's typically 1.5 million gallons over, and this month it's 1.5 million gallons under. That's a lot of water.
Right. And it was under last month, and it was under the month before.
Correct.
And in months past and years past, rainfall didn't seem to affect it, and suddenly it does. And so I'm still...
It may be the elevation of the water table, which could be influenced.
The water table, elevation does change, but we've had dry periods before, and it didn't affect the numbers like this. So something didn't just happen.
So with such a high water production number and a lower wastewater number, that means water's out on the ground somewhere that didn't get into the wastewater system, right? Like,
Not necessarily.
well, possibly,
Correct.
it's somewhere else.
There's a line loss somewhere.
Yeah, like a water line break, like, what about flushing?
People watering their lawns with town water.
Yeah, or flushing the system.
Well, you also get the breweries, got a lot of, they use a lot of water, but they use a lot of sewage.
There should be, ideally, that's net, like what you use, so it gets back to the system. Sure does. Okay, well, okay, just trying to figure out where the water's going. I mean, is there some good reason that there's more water that's in the wastewater system this time? I don't know. Flushing the system and spreading it out, water in your yard or a water line break, that's all I can think of.
A lot of that stuff gets exported too. Just so you
But I think where Steve's getting at is maybe we need some further explanation.
Well, realistically, I mean, I see what you're saying, but realistically, the only thing that's not metered in town is like fire hydrants, right?
They're not.
I mean, they did flush on a regular basis, but it's not.
Right. It's not
Right,
in gallons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just throwing out
But they still do
things I
it.
can think of.
But they done the camera.
It's
Getting ready.
That's what it costs.
That's not gonna explain this either. It would explain the first scenario, where we're getting more wastewater than we're producing water.
Correct.
No, that's all they do is not make sense.
Well, it may explain it relative to breaks that are below the water table. Again, without metering that, I can't tell you that that's 1.5 million gallons, 800,000 gallons, or 2 gallons.
Well,
We'll need the data, and that's, you know, it's not like we haven't known about an I&I problem for years.
I'm amazed that we can continue on without some kind of regulatory action.
Any more discussion?
What are we not complying with?
I don't know. Seems to me that,
Then what's our regulatory action coming from? I'm happy to bring this up with the utilities director, or anyone else for that matter. I'm happy to talk to DEQ myself, but I don't know what I'm talking to them about. If there's a regulatory violation,
No,
it's not gonna be hidden, I'll tell you that right now.
All right, I'll make a motion that we accept the utilities report, treasurer report.
Zach,
All in favor? Opposed? All right. Unfinished business, homestay regulations.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, this is a follow-up to previous discussions about homestead regulation. Previous reports staff reports have outlined the state and local legislation to allow municipal localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia to regulate various aspects of homestay. What's proposed, therefore, not action tonight, but for discussion, is a two-phase approach, which would look at two different aspects of homestay. The one for further study, so it isn't even proposed for the upcoming fiscal year, we proposed for fiscal year 2021. And those about the number of units and the occupancy limits of those. What's proposed for you in front of you are relatively straightforward. It's the registry, which again is allowed for in the state code, the mandatory posting of golf cart regulations along with business licenses, the corresponding loss of privilege that goes along with that. At this point, staff is recommending a phased approach to regulating the homestay accommodations, where the administrative processes would be adopted and put in place effective January 1, 2020, and anything else that pertains to the actual use of the property would be effective January 1st, 2021, pending more discussion and review.
Did we ever act on with the housing, the Airbnbs now in town, with the garbage cans sitting in the street for 3 days?
That is a code violation, and rather than issue violations, typically what the building department does is contact the responsible agent to ensure that the responsible agent manages the property.
So they're doing it.
Correct. Doesn't mean you're not gonna find a trash can out on a Sunday.
Okay, I'm all for the phased approach. What's the next step if we go that way? Do we have to have public comments then on the proposed language that you have here?
No, changes to the town code do not require, and these are town code changes, not zoning ordinance changes. Changes to the town code do not require a public hearing. Obviously, that's within the discretion of the council to do.
Because right now, we're just asking for registration.
Registration and posting of golf right regulations, correct?
And loss of privilege if you violate.
Correct.
I don't have any problems with any of that.
Also in that, was a local party responsible? This is our enforcement, I'm sorry. This is our, I'm sorry.
That actually was one of my questions, because I saw it, and I wasn't sure if it was in this part.
It's in
Did I miss it? It's in the
It's
other
in the
part, right?
attachment. It's in the attachment.
Right.
What you've got there is a draft of what the registry form would look like, and it does speak to a local responsible party. So, you know, to whom do you call actually has responsibility to make sure the trash can is moved? That's not necessarily someone who's going to be on a business license.
Right. So a property would have, you know, if their arrangement is that they have a neighbor, that's that person that brings in the trash can, they list that person.
That's up to the property owner
Right.
to determine who's going to be responsible for that property owner, for that property in the absence of that property owner.
Right.
Because where this differentiates from the bed and breakfast accommodations by conditional use only, this is by right. Bed and breakfast use is by conditional use only, which requires that owner occupancy. These do not require owner occupancy.
Right.
So as a result, the owner may be corporate America, it may be corporate Russia, it may be 5 people who have no interest in the property at all. But someone's got to be the designated local responsible owner, whereas the bed and breakfast owner, by conditional use, has the obligations for those properties, including limitations on parking and occupancy, which do not pertain to any other building that's rented out by right.
I just wanted to make sure that I understand all those things. I think we have a lot of homestay folks that are doing a great job and really care about the community and all those things. I just wanted to make sure that it makes sense and that they can designate a person. It doesn't have to be a property management company or something like that. They can designate who their emergency person is if there's something wrong. Is that
Correct.
what we're saying?
Yeah,
I
correct,
just-
that's the responsible person.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify it.
I had a concern. I had called Deb about this when we were first talking about this, and I don't have an answer for it, but I think it's a question enough that might change the wording that we have. So I was looking in the statute that allows the creation of the registry for rental property. It just became effective in October. And it says here that no ordinance shall require a person to register pursuant to this section, which is this. If a person is, 1, licensed by the real estate board, or is a property owner who is represented by a real estate licensee. Okay?
What does that mean?
Well, I'm wondering, and I don't know this, so I'm asking the question, I don't have an answer, but aren't some of the homestays or whatever actually managed or represented by real estate?
Yes.
Okay, and if those are, then wouldn't this preclude those individuals not being on our registry?
Correct.
Okay. And I don't know how many of those there are, so
Quite a few.
so I'm just thinking if we think the registry might catch everybody, I don't think it will necessarily,
But we can ask them to register, our property managers to register their homestays, and they're not required by that statute.
our ordinance can't require it.
Right, but we could ask them to, for other reasons, just as a part of our community.
We could,
You know,
we could.
I think it would be great to kind of have those people that we can communicate with them in a special way if we need
Yeah,
to,
I'm
or
just-
what have you.
I think, for me, I think, I'm managing the real estate offices in town does a decent job of the business license and and all that stuff as it is right now, so that's, I don't think we would have a lot of problems with
So
that.
we couldn't penalize them,
Right.
okay? Or they'll be outside of the ordinance, but they could be on the list if you.
Right.
Okay.
Just not required.
Okay, I just wanted to explore that with you guys. Thank you.
Well, I was one of the people that thought the conditional use permit for short-term rentals was a good idea. And I appreciate what the staff did in helping me understand the complexity of that. I still have a little confusion because we had a couple of Airbnbs that went through the process for conditional use permits, but they didn't need them. So I'm not sure how that all works, but there were two, and specifically this year that happened. The main reason I thought that it was a good idea for the conditional use permit, so I'm not saying it has to be called that, but I think gathering people who are doing this and having information of expectations of what this is a helpful thing. I think that, one of my biggest concerns is, are they doing liability insurance? I mean, there's just informational. I'm not saying that this is something that is regulatory. It is something that's informational for our short-term homestay owners, whatever you might call them. That it's a place where they can come each year and they register their property, they go through all the process, but we also have a chance to talk about the impact, the positive impact that they have on our community, but also the challenges that we have when they're not there and who's managing it and how that works. The golf cart stuff, the trash can stuff, it's just communication. We don't do any of that really with that group in any way. That's the whole reason I had suggested the conditional uses, because I thought that's a process that they go through and they earn it kind of to get there. So is there some way, and maybe this is in the discussion part as far as the next subgroup, is there some way to do that? Because it is a huge part of our community in a very positive way. There's probably just a very handful of few that aren't managing it and taking care of it in the way that we would want them to.
I think the only problem you have with that is because this is by right, so the only thing we can do is feed them information. You can't really hold them to register anything, because it's legally, they don't have to do anything other than, if we go with this homestay thing, because that's new to the state of Virginia, and if they have a real estate agent, then they don't have to do that at all. It's kind of a goofy scenario, but, I mean, if we can encourage them to sign up, that'd be great, because if something happens, but, I mean, it's gonna be tough. Some people are very, very private about this stuff. It's gonna be hard.
I just think with some of the challenges we're having, and one of the reasons we started looking at this in the beginning is the concern of the change of our community and the impact that that's going to have. And I think we owe it to our full-time residents to know that we're doing the best we can. And if it's 10 people that show up, then that's 10 people more that we've talked to. And there's a great positive network of folks that are owning short-term rentals. And the power of that speaks. If somebody's not doing it, it stands out more. And I think there's just no reason not to have some type of information session or something for them that shares all those things. Like, what's your responsibility as a short-term rental person? Because they do have a responsibility. They don't have to go through conditional use to learn all those things that you're responsible for. That's why I wanted it, so it wasn't really in the technicality of conditional use. It was more, can they go through a process that they learn some of the risks, some of the expectations from the community, and moving forward. That's the whole reason I brought this thing up from the beginning. Is just something positive in a way to help our community as we move forward.
If there's some way to control it, like you can't have another B&B.
Right.
Or you send general to stay there. Mm-hmm. I would just say you have one Airbnb. You can't have a.
You can't restrict it.
But I disagree with that because of all the people we've heard from, but they've already made an investment in our community. If we want to do that moving forward,
yeah.
Absolutely, if that's what you want to do. But we cannot do that to people who have already invested money and yeah, they can't. That's not possible in moving forward. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but I like that you asked Paul how we're going to move forward. I just don't want us to lose the momentum.
Right.
To me, we have a couple of options. We can have one of those work sessions like we did with the leash law. And Smitty, you did an excellent job in leading that meeting, and it gave people to have interactive conversation. I think we owe that to people who are a significant part of our community in short-term rental to do that kind of discussion. I don't know if it's that kind of work session or if you maybe ask for a representative from different communities so that that voice is heard.
And realtors, so
Realtors,
that
yeah, exactly.
if it has value for the people who are managing those, if being part of the discussion and part of a voluntary registration program has value, then they'll do it.
It make it a positive,
Yeah.
a positive piece because we want it to be a positive part of our community.
How about when they apply for their business license, we give them a packet of information that they need to abide by?
She does, Deb does a lot of that, but this is interactive. I mean, I think that, it's kind of like a golf cart registration. They sign off at the bottom and, it's not the packet that sits over here. I think it's, when you sit face to face with people and you're a part of, that's the kind of community we are.
Well, but if they've got that information, at least then when they had a code violation of having 25 people in an occupied house of 14, they've already had the information.
Oh, I don't think there's anything wrong with giving them that, but I think, number one, working toward our policy, in an open work session or something like that. And then once we get that policy, we offer an information session for them or something like that.
Both, not either.
Like, it's not either or, yeah.
No.
The biggest thing is they have, 10 people in their house, they're allowed to have 10, and they have 12, and there's a fire, and
Yes.
they're not getting insurance with it.
Yeah.
That's their loss.
But it's our, I think, there's nothing wrong with a town government being informational and helping a part of their community in some way. It's a lot like what we do with Main Street with the business community. We bring them together and we talk through things all the time that impact their business and their bottom line. This is, for short-term rentals, it's their business. And just as B&Bs are a group's business, and there's ways you go about that, and in the long run, it helps our full-time residents feel like they're a part of not losing their community.
Councilman, with all due respect, the R1 district is still a residential district. And the statement of intent in the R1 district, which is basically the historic district, is to limit commercial activity. So when we start talking about homestays as a business, it kind of runs in direct violation of what our statement of intent for that district is. And that district's evolving.
Yeah.
So that statement of intent probably doesn't meet reality anymore.
It
But there are
doesn't,
people who
yeah.
invested in that district, not expecting to have a hospitality district.
I totally agree, but the reality of what's happening in running an Airbnb and a VRBO is that it's a business for that person. They're not declaring it as some of them do, as blank LLC. But, there's not a sign out there that says they're what have you.
Well, some are.
Well, I know, that's one of my
I
questions.
can
That's not legal, right?
It's much like the regular B&B signs.
Yeah.
You allow a little bit of signage.
Right, the 4 square feet.
Right.
Yeah, the business example is that those people who are operating it, that is their mentality, that it is a personal business for them and renting that out.
It's a side hustle.
It's just, yeah.
I mean, it's always a
It's just-
side hustle.
yeah.
I mean, we did it.
Yeah.
I've done it.
Yeah,
So it's
and there's
a side
nothing
hustle.
wrong with it. I mean, we couldn't be who we are without it. We cannot accommodate the people we accommodate. It's part of the charm of this town and community. We accommodate more dogs and more kids because of it. But they are making money as a business. I mean, it's not like they're just doing it for the heck of it.
For what it's worth, the commercial residential, the CR district allows B&B by right as opposed to conditional use, with the recognition that, within certain contexts, commercial activity and residential activity can peacefully coexist. Again, that's not the statement of intent in the R1.
Right.
But reality is past the statement of intent in the
Yes.
R1.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this a number of times. We reside beside a business. We're a business, and beside us is a short-term rental that's supposed to have 13 people and has 20 regularly. We're required to have 6 parking places and all those other things and trash cans and all those, and they're not required any of those things. So the world has changed, kind of, this short-term rental thing has changed who we are.
So the next step, like Councilman Grossman says, could be, we need to think about this registration. If nothing, just to get our arms around the volume, okay? Include realtors in part of a discussion about that for voluntary registration of those locations that they represent. And some dialogue with all those, plus other citizens, particularly just in R1, there you bring up a really good point about that, on the tip, that they get some say-so in it too, in their neighborhood. It's their issue when they can't park, or they have trash cans out too long, things like that. So I think what the next steps are move kind of forward with some registration program, recognizing it's a first step to getting our arms around the magnitude of the number of states.
I really appreciate staff separating this out in phases, because I think it's going to make it a little bit more manageable to kind of move forward. So I really appreciate that.
All right, well, I'll get up with Larry. We'll sit down and see if we'll get a date, and Larry will reach out and then to the public and see if we can have a session.
Good.
Anybody got any more comments? All right, next. Time manager recruitment update.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, in the absence of the clerk, to the best of my knowledge, there's no change in anything included. So as of the writing of the stamp report, which was a week ago, 15 resumes have been received. They all went to the clerk's office, and the first review of submittals was advertised for October 23rd.
Okay, so there is
I've got one
point
change.
change.
Vice Mayor Bennett is no longer on the, he's unable to participate. So Councilwoman Howland will be replacing him on the committee.
Do we know when we're planning on
As
starting?
soon as the after,
As soon as after the 23rd?
yes, after that. Up next, new business, conditional use permit for accessory dwelling unit at 9 Park Road. No public hearing.
Alright, so this applicant would like to convert the second story of a detached garage into an accessory dwelling unit. This is an existing structure. With the dwelling unit located on the second floor and the garage located on the first floor. There's a driveway big enough for 2 cars to park, along with 2 spaces in the garage, and no proposed changes to the exterior of the structure are proposed. The proposed project meets the provisions of section 4.3 of the zoning ordinance related to conditional use permits. The project meets the comprehensive plan goals of promoting accessory dwelling units within established neighborhoods, and it meets the required parking requirements of section 4.2 with the 2 spaces available in the garage and 2 additional on the driveway. So staff recommends set a public hearing date for November 22nd. Or 21st.
The public hearing date for this, for November 21st.
We got a motion?
Second.
And it's gonna pick you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, up next, historic district guideline principles, Councilman Grossman's going to give up and talk to us a little bit about overall solar work.
Incredible work, young man.
Yeah, I know, this is, all right,
I got the clock.
quick. So why am I here? We met with the Historic District Review Board a month ago, or maybe more, on a work session. To prepare for that work session, we had put together a set of guiding principles that we wanted to discuss and move forward. They were unedited. I just put them on a sheet. They were presented at the meeting. We really got into a conversation to a certain degree. We agreed with some, we disagreed with others, and we kind of left it at that particular point. From that particular meeting, I did a lot of research with regards to refining the guiding principles and then putting together my basis document to support why they are valid. In my mind, this is Paul Grossman now presenting material that I researched. I did have Councilwoman Burge and Zach Pons review the material, and we had some discussions on the wording. But that was the intent, to come and really put together a document that can be critiqued, both by the town council and others, including the Historic Review Board. So that's what, this is just a high level of what I uncovered for myself. The real key document is what's attached to the staff report that includes the vision and the guiding principles and the basis documents. So I just would like to take you through some of the highlights of what that is. Went through research of obviously the Secretary of Interior's documents, our preservation plan. It was an interesting read again. And then what I did was go through ordinances and historic guidelines for these particular entities. And it was interesting because a lot had similar verbiage, but a lot had nuances that I could glean and provide supporting evidence to support the guiding principles that I had put together. So there was a lot of good research material there. When you get to the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabbing, okay, what I want to make sure you understand is there's four aspects here. We keep talking about preservation, we talk about restoration, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. There is no section of those four standards that deal with new construction. And I want to talk to that a little bit further. But these particular standards that came out of the Secretary of the Interior's document was actually pulled right into our design guidelines. And they're on page 18, and one of those, two of those were quoted today. Now, interestingly enough, though, the Secretary of the Interior standards deals with historic properties only. All right, they had to come up with a set of criteria in order to review applicants that are going in for tax credits and what have you on the historic side. Historic properties, okay?
So that basically, it doesn't apply to the 50-year envelope.
I'll talk to the 50-year envelope as to how you get to become contributing. But yes, in our language, contributing is part of the historic fabric of our town, and it's, in my mind, clearly distinguishable against the non-contributing. Okay. Now, when you go into the standards for the rehabilitation guidelines, they have two standards that deals with new construction. We use this term incorrectly in some of our past field discussions, okay? These two, 9 and 10, deal with new additions, exterior alterations related to new construction on the historic property, okay? They go so far in 10 to say adjacent because they get into, well, you don't want to build something crazy right next to a historic property. So when they talk adjacent, it is adjacent, okay? But that's the difference here. So when we talk about those four types, in rehabilitation, you do have an aspect of new construction, all right? Here's the new construction that they're talking about. It's essentially expanding the footprint on your historic structure. So in this particular case, the square unit that was added onto the right is the new construction under rehabilitation. All right, it changed the footprint. And here your guidelines talk about it's possible to do this, but make sure it's distinct from your main historic property. compatible but distinct from it. Don't blend it in such that it all looks historic in the end, all right? Now, I just put a note here, when we were talking about 12 Peach Street, that's where I started seeing language coming up on new construction. Oh, we're looking at this as new construction, and some of that was quoted in the documentation. No, that is not new construction. That is strictly a rehab project. And those criteria or standards for rehab should apply. All right, so I'm not saying our decision right or wrong. I'm just saying we've got to be very careful when we talk about new construction and what it means when we extract from the Secretary of Interior's document or design guidelines to what this means. Now, looking at our different ordinances and design guidelines across the board, people will now take the new construction guidelines, which is not that extensive, and apply it to your overlay district. All right, and that's where you've got to be real careful on honing in on an historic property and using that same guideline language in something that's 4 blocks away in your overlay district. I'm not saying you don't have criteria, but I'm saying you've got to be real careful on how stringent you get on applying that criteria. Preservation plan, a couple things. Again, the fundamental premise was economic development, which they said historic guidelines or an historic district was a major element in economic revitalization when it was put together in '96. Shouldn't burden individuals with economic means. I think we even had something in our ordinance at one time that we may have extracted, but I'm not going there. Permitting the widest possible latitude, and here for the 4th bullet is really my key. The goal is not to recreate a lost historical period, rather respect what remains and to build upon it in a sympathetic manner. So if you wanted to collapse everything, to me that is still applicable for us. And the preservation plan goes on to say that the design guidelines are not a set of rules. We keep arguing standards versus guidelines and what have you. No, they're not a set of rules that are black and white, and they are all open up to interpretation. All right, so when we get into vision and guiding principles, the only reason I put a vision together is because I need something that's driving us towards. So I had put a vision of a couple sentences down, and I bounced it against the comp plan and what have you to see if it deviated, and I couldn't find anything that said otherwise. And really what I was trying with the vision, because I've heard this a number of times, trying to corner us into, are we a beach town or are we a historic district, meaning that if I'm in a historic district, I'm going to apply different rules and really force people to go into preservation. All right, so the vision was kind of a broad brush that were a bunch of things. We've got a historic element, and we've got a beach element amongst other things. I don't want to go through all the guiding principles, but just pull out a couple. Number 4, we're talking design guidelines. Our design lines even contain standards and guidelines, and that's acceptable. Guidelines allows for flexibility and reasonableness. The Secretary of Interior's even goes that far and talks that kind of language. I grouped 6, 7, and 8 that deal with contributing structures. So these are the ones that we want to make sure we retain. We need to ensure that we have an inventory map of what those are. It's not the overlay that we're talking about, it's an inventory of what those structures are, and if it's the DHR list, that's what it is. But that list has to be controlled through town council. We just had an amendment go into the historic list in April of this year. I don't recall seeing anything coming through town council that reviewed and accepted that prior to going to DHR. Now, I wasn't here all the time, but that may have happened. All I'm saying that any change to that list needs to be controlled.
So you're saying any change to the list means any property or structure that is determined to be a contributing property or structure will go through with a town level and be put on a master list that's at the Department of Historic Resources. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
And our ordinance even speaks to the fact that we do have this per ordinance, and I can't say it's very clear. Okay? I want to be real clear once we get this. Alterations, additions possible as long as they don't destroy, obviously, the historic significance. In my mind, the action needed here is to fix the definition in our guidelines and ordinance when we talk about what is contributing. Guidelines only talks greater than 50 years. That's not appropriate. It really comes down to greater than 50 years will only get you into a start of consideration as to whether it becomes contributing. The other aspects that come with, is it a significant event, a significant person, or is it significant architecture associated with the ability to now make that historic? Again, in a controlled fashion, and I think our ordinances talk to the fact that the Historic Review Board can propose to us, and we can elect to decide to add or delete. Okay? Our ordinance talks about, it has a good definition, but it fixes the 50 years in 1940. So I think when the ordinance was put together, 50 years back was 1940. So we need to change that to agree with greater than 50 years. All right, the crux, this is really the defining moment for me. For guiding principle number 9, we're talking about existing non-contributing properties. And I am saying that those should follow what I'll call new construction guidelines. And in our guidelines, it has to be clearly separated what is the criteria for new construction. So you take an example of our appeal on Jefferson Avenue siting. If that is not a contributing structure, let's say it's a non-contributing structure, I would say you apply the criteria for new construction and you list, or you find out what our guidelines say relative to what siting is acceptable for us. If vinyl is not acceptable, it's not on the list, then it doesn't get applied. That's the way I'm looking at existing non-contributing properties. Now, a lot of ordinances, a lot of guidelines have the definitions, but they don't apply it within the context of the ordinance or the design guidelines. It gets lost. So you can say it's a non-contributing in some of these design guidelines, and all of a sudden there's no clear distinction on what that criteria is. I'm saying that needs to be real clear, and I'm saying that criteria should be new construction. That's me talking. Okay. Guiding principle 10 now gets into the flexibility aspects, reasonable and practical. There's numerous cases that are extracted that back this up. Blacksburg, Smithfield, Suffolk, Stanton, Fredericksburg, that when you start talking about new construction, there is flexibility, and not every item in your criteria needs to be followed. Okay, new construction. A house being built up in Jefferson doesn't fall into your contributing, therefore there's flexibility, and it needs to conform with the context of that particular neighborhood. All right? Guiding principle 13, what I did there is I went through all ordinances and listed all the exceptions, and I put them in the table that you have in front of you, and I said, fine. I want the exemptions from the board's review done by the zoning administrator, but it's not as though the zoning administrator will not use criteria, they'll use the historic district review guideline to make those decisions. And whatever decisions are made, they're summarized at the subsequent meeting. So there is some openness to what is occurring and is documented. All right, so with the generation of this particular document, we shot it off to the Department of Historic Resources, because we've had conversations with them in the past. So here we had Aubrey von Linden and Elizabeth Lippert both email back saying the following, and then we followed up with an hour conversation with them. Guiding principles as proposed by our certified local government are acceptable. All right. Aubrey is involved with the certified local government. It's basically saying you can make those rules. You don't have to agree with Blacksburg. You can make up your own as a certified, local government. So what they viewed as far as the principles that we presented to them, which is what you have, they said they look fine. Don't review to the level of a tax credit. Does not recommend going with option for the guiding principle 14, because we did find that the zoning administrator in certain locales reviewed non-contributing properties. And I don't recommend that either. I just wanted to put that in place that certain groups say non-contributing is reviewed by the zoning administrator only. All right, just for information only. And then really the last bullet is prompting our meeting with them in the near future, red flags being raised on the number of appeals that the town council is agreeing to. So basically they said, hey, we don't mind you with the appeals, just so many in a short period of time saying something's not right. So again, that prompted, and she didn't take sides. You say it's just a red flag. She has since reviewed them and will be coming to talk to us. I don't believe on each one, but it will be part of that conversation. All right, so where do we go? In my mind, I've allowed the Historic District Review Board members and others to review the guiding principles and address the town council, and perhaps we can use our work session with DHR to get some of those comments out. So that's where I want to go. It's guiding principles that I'm willing to defend. I'm looking for town council ultimately to agree, disagree, alter, whatever, but we got to move off the dime in order to establish what we want and then hand it down to the Historic District Review Board in order to implement through their revisions and actions during meetings. Questions?
Yeah, I think I would actually like to see this get to the Historic District Review Board.
What? I can hear you.
I would like to see this document get to the Historic District Review Board sooner rather than later. So that way they've had a chance to look over it before our work session.
Yeah, and it's attached to our agenda, so it's all there.
So, I think this is a great start, and I like the language, and it's language that I've used in some of the appeals that we've heard, in that guidelines inform and assist, it's guidance, it's a basis for decision, it's a framework, it's an education. It's not, you do it this way or you don't do it. That's not the intent of the Historic District Review Board or the guidelines. They're guidelines. The characters, match the character. The intent is not to be overly specific or dictate designs. Compatible. The wording that's used in here is exactly what the Historic District Review Board should be doing. They're not the Gestapo. They're not putting down the law. They are interpreting a set of guidelines, trying to help people do a historic or semi-historic restoration of a property. I'm also overwhelmed that you could put in, without any review, skylights or solar collectors. That just is overwhelming to me. And I don't know the difference between the italicized ones and the bolded ones, but
the bolded ones are added. The other ones are
okay, so you can make any change to a structure, contributing or non-contributing, that's not visible from a public street.
Right.
Do anything you want, no review.
No, it will go through zoning administrator.
But anyway, Paul, I think it's fantastic. The issue or the biggest thing is going to be trying to get some interpretation as opposed to black and white. This isn't a black and white process. It isn't yes or no. It is, let's see what we can do to make it work.
And what I found, that language is actually written into either design guidelines or ordinance space. And that's, a lot of this material can be picked up and actually inserted where most appropriate.
I think one of the most important things that Paul points out, and he and I rattled around back and forth and putting all of this to test, is the idea, and we've wrestled with this, what's contributing structure, what's a non-contributing structure, and then what's new construction. And we have been wrestling in these appeals around those issues, in part because of the definition of contributing being different in the ordinance versus the guidelines, okay? And two, not really going back to look at DHR and the original and update that happened a couple of years ago, I guess, list of contributing structures so that we know clearly what they are, which ones they are, as well as, Steve, what you're saying. Those are the nuances of once you get down through that hierarchy. We've wrestled at that level. But I think this thinking will help us and the Historical Review Board to really outline, you know, if it's new construction, you're going down this road, okay? And if it's new construction, it could be a new house. We've had that issue. And how does that fit? And if it's contributing, and has been contributing, and contributing means age plus features that haven't been destroyed over the years, which can bring it to, like we had the one over on Jefferson, non-contributing. Certainly was old enough that it wasn't on the contributing list, it wasn't not identified that way. So I think that's like the very first level that we got to get to, so that we're all talking on the same plane. Thank you, Paul, for doing all that.
That's exactly my, you know, since I've been here, this is what, this biggest thing has always been what has been followed.
And change of personality, personnel also, you know, factors into.
All right. Up next, reappointment of planning commission commissioner.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Michael Strube is current member of the planning commission. His current appointment expires October 31, 2019. Mr. Strube has expressed interest in continuing his service as planning commission for another term. Staff recommendation happily is to reappoint Mr. Strube to the planning commission.
I make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Amen. Yes, thank you.
No discussion. Thank you very much.
Easiest decision of the night, let me tell you.
Town manager comments.
None, sir.
Mayor and council comments. Councilwoman Byrd, we'll start with you, man.
Tough night. Thanks for everybody's really intelligent discussion on very difficult issues.
What do you got?
That's all I got.
Okay.
Thank God it's over.
I've spoken enough.
And violently, great.
Passion.
Councilwoman Howley?
I just wanted to, the planning commission is doing such a great job on getting out and moving forward on the comp plan. They're doing a survey and everyone, Zach, I think that the actual survey, like the electronic, will be ready soon.
It's ready.
It's ready. So, I think as town council, we should get that and then we can start sending it to people and how to get the feedback that, and there's hard copies, of course, to do that. Just a quick update, Main Street has been working closely with Zach, it seems like forever on wayfinding, but I feel like we've done a thorough job, and we're actually going to be scheduling a community information session, just a sharing of where we're at, what we've researched, and what we're recommending to move forward on, and I'll share that date as soon as it comes forward. Town council has already seen the design way back when, and move forward with that. This is just the kind of getting you from Stone Road into town and then directing you throughout. It's not small signage, it's the big stuff.
Chris, that's the whole town.
And then just, I think the town council, I was representing Cape Charles with the mayor at VML. Kind of three things that I took away from that. I thought it's always really good to be there. The networking with other towns, some of the ones of which Paul referenced often, to talk about the same types of things they're going through is so valuable. One thing that overwhelmed me a little bit, and I felt like maybe I had my head in the sand, but the amazing amount of discussion and presentations on the opioid epidemic. And I worried as I sat there so often, are we burying our heads in the sand? Like, what are we, there's so many communities within Virginia that have been impacted by this tremendously, and we are right around the corner from it, if not there, you know. And we kind of live in our, like, bubble in some ways. So I just think I'm going to ask John Coker about it as far as from a county level, what we're talking about and what is our plan. We don't want to get caught like a lot of these communities like Roanoke and other places have. And we're like some of those in so many ways from the rural aspect. And we need to be prepared so that we're not in a reactionary kind of standpoint. And I don't know, maybe I'm ignorant that we are doing all these things and I'm just clueless to them, so I have no idea. Did you have a?
I had a thought, may I address a little bit of that? It is a very serious thing, and VACO does the same thing for counties. And then for the past couple of years, that has been an agenda item, a presentation item. There are more than, I think, 2,500 cases pending right now by localities all over the United States against pharmaceutical companies, mid-level managers, and lots of different kinds of things. Academic is one of those.
Right.
I'm not sure if Northampton is, they had not told last I heard, but it has affected everything from social services, obviously public services, public safety, school systems, and even national formulas now that we have. You've heard this at UNL, that helps the community to evaluate the dollars. That's the hard thing. How do you figure out really in the hard dollars, let alone the human cost that every community is seeing because of your injury?
It's one of those things that people think don't happen here.
There's a lot of
the Attorney General, one of the sessions was an update from the Attorney General on the lawsuit aspect of it, and you know, he's holding out for Virginia not settling because he wants the...
That's with one company.
Yeah, the Purdue company.
One.
And he's holding out because he wants the executives to be held responsible and accountable. So it was very worthwhile for those types of things. And then the last thing, and I know Larry's really been leading the way on it, but it was very informational, was the cybersecurity aspect from our town government. And Larry's full on underway on protecting us and getting us set for that. But those were the three things that kind of stood out for me. So I just wanted to say it was money well spent. I learned a lot for sure. Got kind of scared about the opioid thing and freaked out every session I went into, but it was good to learn.
All right, I just want to touch on a couple things, or actually one thing. Basically, we all know it's Bay Shore, the yacht center has got about 100 jobs that they're looking for. You know, Bay Shore Concrete has got about 125. You know, I don't know who they're going to put there because a lot of the guys that were there before have moved on. So we're starting to run into, we already know we're running into a housing crisis. So we need to start focusing. I know we're doing it with the water and sewer, running it up to Angela, we're talking about that. When we're going to do that, how we're going to do it, all that stuff. But we need to really start thinking about the direction in which it's kind of start to go. I'm hoping we start to drift a little away from tourism to balance it out so we can get more of a 12-month cycle here, so we can get some families, some kids here, and a place for people to live and enjoy. It's just something I don't want to be caught trying to catch up and figure out how we're going to deal with it. I'd rather start kind of we have been planning, but I think we need to really start thinking about it because it seems to be happening pretty quickly. There's, announcements that happened about, we saw the yacht center one, we saw the coastal one, the one that just happened here, the contract for, building a portion of the decking in front of the old Toddy property, that's out there. So that just means more boats and stuff in here, so we gotta start planning for this, guys.
I talked to the town planner of the county planner of Ottawa County, and what got them into a bind is that, just what you're saying, they expected 5,000 new jobs created in a span of 5 years, and they had it by company listed, and then all of a sudden they had a wake-up call going, we're gonna have to do something with workforce housing, and they jumped into it both feet at all levels and worked with developers to get there.
Yes.
Or getting there.
It's one of those things where good financial health, I'd rather not see us have to go beyond those numbers that we were at, where we can kind of do this the smart way versus getting buried with debt trying to do it. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things. It's just something we just got to keep an eye on, see what exactly is happening, and because a lot of it is happening.
It's going to be a lot like teachers having problems renting.
It's all
for
it's all,
it's all. I mean, if you're getting $4,000 a week for your house, you'd rather close it down in the wintertime and not have anybody there because you're going to throw them out in the summer. Yeah, so it's even bigger.
There's some headaches come with that. It ain't all kind of problem.
It ain't all that.
No, I can tell you.
Have you all go to the housing summit?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And a lot of talk. It was both academic in Northampton. Dave Barber and John Cook were there. No real magic bullets. They agreed to meet in another 3 months. There is a governor's housing conference in Hampton in another month or so.
If we're reaching out to John and those guys, we're really the driving force for the Lower County.
Yeah, what I'm going to start talking about, and I'm going to explore a little bit more, is grant money, because I've been talking to the Housing Authority. They have grant money, and what I was going to perhaps shape up after some discussions is perhaps a grant around what can the town offer, what can the county offer relative to incentivize workforce housing.
Right, that's why I think we might need, in looking at that, we might need some General Assembly help to give us some authority to do things that are a little more creative.
And I brought this up in the Congresswoman and when we were up at the college, I brought this up. I really brought it up because it was kind of happening back then, but not nearly to the extent it is now. Because just trying to take something of that level and also become into 1,000 people town and also kaboom, how do you deal with it? So you're exactly right. I think the more we can inform those guys, I think they know what's going on. They know more than we got because there's other stuff. Rocket parts coming into the country without that time.
Our delegate and senator were there at the housing. And what they really, my takeaway there is no one central repository of knowledge on housing in the two counties. When you talk about the PDC, they're more HUD-related housing, and they've got programs going there. When you go into workforce, there's a void, and there is lack of knowledge to somebody to say, how can I get through all the alphabets organizations to know where I want to go or where. That's what I'm saying. A grant, in my mind, would have somebody come in and help us get to that. What are the options available to the town and to the county?
It's all right. That's a talking.
I've got 2 or 3 or 12 things. So a couple of things I'm gonna touch on. I went to the Mayor's Institute in, Tabby, and, it's really the networking and just going over different problems and hearing how other people, deal with certain problems and stuff and learning. But they had a couple of, I attended one really good roundtable discussion while I was there. It was with the Virginia, it was with their regions, Virginia Department of Emergency Management. And I wanted to talk storms and their zones, because I've never agreed with Cape Charles zone since the day they come out with it, and I still don't agree with it. They've got half of Cape Charles in A, and the other half's in B. But Cape Charles A is the same as a Worcester, same as Back Bay, same as Potosi. It's a little bit different. I'm hopeful. I told him my concerns and I said, there's like it was took off the top of your ass. So he said that's exactly what it was done. So hopefully we can actually get that changed. Other than that, I do mention earlier about Sharon in the library. It's been pretty amazing what that library's done in the past. Well, I've been here since 2005, so I've seen major changes with the library and the programs, so that's just a steady go, and I think Sharon's been a great part of that. With that being said, got a few announcements. We got trunk or treat in Haunted Harbor on October 26th. We'll have our strategic planning session right here, 6 p.m. on November 7th.
It's November?
November 7th, 6 p.m., November 7th.
Sorry, I had that's December or something.
November the 11th, town offices are closed for Veterans Day. November 21st, town council regular meeting. November 27th, town offices closed at noon for Thanksgiving holiday. November 28th, 29th, town offices closed for Thanksgiving holiday. Can I get a motion to recess?
Just a second, I think what's missing here is our work session. I think October 28th
28th.
with Historic District Review Board,
Yeah.
Town Council, and Aubrey on Monday.
Yeah.
Does it start at 6 or 6:30?
6,
Okay. That's what I have to ask.
and then there's that. Can I get a motion?
Make a motion that we go in closed session.
Recess.
Recess.